Okay, so now that I've started the recording, I see that there are people here from, some of you have a lot of experience with frevvo all the way to some people who haven't used frevvo at all. So I'm going to do a very quick overview. First start out with 4 or 5 slides, just giving you a quick background on what frevvo is. And then we're going to do a demo, actually jump into a series of demos where we'll show you various aspects of the product, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Expected to take somewhere between 35 to 45 minutes overall. Okay. So really quick, you know, what do we do in the first place? At frevvo, our cloud-based software allows you to use a drag and drop form and workflow designer and point-click wizards to very easily design any form and automate any approval workflow associated with that form. So an example might be, I want to buy something for the company. I fill out a form, then I got to get that signed by my manager. So I walk over to the office or email it to him or her, and for a signature. Perhaps in my company, if the amount is greater than $5,000, it needs to be approved by a VP. So then it needs to be routed to that VP, et cetera, et cetera. Many examples within organizations. We'll just talk about that in a couple of slides. Many customers have been able to automate their workflows like purchase orders, employee onboarding, travel authorization, et cetera, literally in a matter of days, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, things of that nature. So it's very, relatively speaking, it's very easy to use. Now, of course, there are situations where these projects can take longer, depending on what kinds of systems you need to integrate with. InfoPath, we've had a number of customers who have replaced their InfoPath forms with frevvo forms, obviously primarily because Microsoft is no longer supporting, or for a number of years is no longer supporting, has discontinued upgrades to InfoPath. But the reason these customers chose frevvo in that situation is because they're interested in the capabilities. They want the rich control set. They want to be able to integrate with backend data sources, perform automated calculations so people don't have to use a calculator while filling out a form. Conditional logic showing and hiding parts of the form only as necessary, right? Complex custom business rules, etc. In addition to that, frevvo also has a very easy to use drag and drop designer. We'll take a quick look at that, really fast look at the designer as well. And also very important nowadays is very full mobile support. So a form that you create in frevvo will work on all mobile devices. It'll automatically work on your smartphone, on your tablet, as well as your desktop computer without your having to do anything. Now, of course, there are customizations available to you if you choose to use them. So it's features allowing you to actually upgrade from InfoPath and support the business requirements that led you to choose InfoPath in the first place. And then also kind of tied into that is the ability to connect to SharePoint. So this is a relatively new feature in frevvo, point-and-click wizards that allow you to save your documents to a SharePoint library, or you can also write data to a SharePoint list. And I won't dwell upon this much because we're going to take a look at this wizard and see what we're talking about in here. Of great importance to many of our customers, especially the ones who are using InfoPath and SharePoint, is the fact that frevvo works very well in their existing Microsoft environment. So many people have significant existing investments in Microsoft technology. So you can deploy frevvo on Windows. Of course, you can also use our cloud-based system, but if you want to deploy it in-house, we offer that too, and it works just fine on Windows. Many customers are authenticating using their Active Directory system. So frevvo integrates directly with your Active Directory. You can also set it up with single sign-on. You can save to SharePoint. frevvo also works with Microsoft Azure's AD for SAML. So you can work with cloud-based SAML provided by Microsoft Azure. Certainly integrates with SQL Server. A lot of our customers have SQL Server, probably the most common database that customers integrate with, and certainly works in Microsoft browsers, Internet Explorer, as well as all mobile devices. So this is of great importance to many of our customers as well. And it's not just something that works with a couple of technologies, but it fits into your existing infrastructure. We have a large number of customers, over 750, just a smattering of them here, many names that I'm sure you'll recognize. And of course, we have many other customers as well. A lot of universities and schools as well as organizations really across all verticals are using frevvo today to automate their forms and workflows on a whole wide variety of architectures and business requirements as well. And last slide, really, what are they using it for? Here are some examples. I'd mentioned, purchase order is a common one. Leave approvals, expense reports, travel authorization, student registration, timesheet, employee onboarding, patient referrals. Really very common day-to-day workflows, things that people are doing on an everyday basis that are unnecessarily consuming time, chasing down a manager for a signature, following up with multiple emails, making a call, et cetera, et cetera. It just wastes time and prevents people from focusing on what's important, be it students or customers or whatever, or patients, whatever the case may be. And I know I said last slide, but this is really the last one. Why did they choose to use frevvo? It's mainly because it actually meets business requirements. Business workflows, approval workflows have complex requirements in practice. They do need to work on mobile devices. They need to generate PDFs. So an employee onboarding workflow might need to generate a federal W-4, a state W-4, an I-9, and maybe some other PDF as well. You can do that with frevvo. Secure digital signatures, so you don't have to print, sign, scan, and upload documents or email them around. Things like Active Directory, SQL integration, SharePoint, business rules, and very other things. You use native apps or do custom coding, but it's really just not practical. It's very, very expensive. And even if you had the money, it's very hard to find the necessary skill set. And that's where frevvo comes in. It's much easier to use. It works on mobile. It's built for business. You get very rapid ROI. And you can get, we have an ROI calculator on our website as well. So that brings us to demos, just jumping into the software here. And as I mentioned, we've got a number of, I was planning on going through a number of little short snippets of demoing frevvo. We'll take a quick look at the form designer. We'll take a quick look at how you can use data sources in frevvo, because I know that's important to several InfoPath customers. Apply those data sources to a database connector example, should be very fast, and then go into a workflow, install a template, connect it to SharePoint, and give you a look at the visual tool builder that's coming up real soon. All this should be relatively quick. So now I'm going to jump into the actual software itself. So as you can see here, I'm logged into, let me make this full screen almost at least. I'm logged into frevvo, logged into our cloud system over here. You'll see that I'm logged in as a user called designer2 at a tenant called ashish.com. So for those who aren't familiar with frevvo, it's a multi-tenant system. Whether you install it on-premise or cloud, you have it's almost the same software. It's a multi-tenant system. You're going to be creating your tenant, and a tenant is essentially your domain. You sign in. You could to your tenant. You can create multiple users. You can have roles, so users can connect to. So you can route to specific roles within your organizations. And the other thing about tenants is they don't cross each other. So nothing in tenant 1 is visible across to other tenants like tenant 2 and tenant 3, even though they may have the same shared underlying infrastructure. So let me make this a little bigger. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a simple form, just drag and drop a little bit to give you a quick look at the form designer itself. So the first thing you do is I'm going to click new over here and I'll create a new application. And an application is just a collection of forms, your forms, flows, schemas, scripts, everything. The things that are related to each other are stored in an application. Applications are useful because you can download the entire application from server 1 or tenant 1 and upload it to another one. I can click on properties here for the application, and so I'll just call it demo app. You can choose a few other parameters over here that are not important right now. You're in the forms view for the application. Obviously, we don't have any forms in this since we just created the application. I'm going to click new over here and launch a wizard. I don't have any templates installed in here, but you could install your own templates in your own tenant to serve as starting points for designers who want to create forms. Click finish over here and you'll be launched into the form designer. This is the main form designer screen of the product. See on the left-hand side here, you have a palette of controls. It's a very rich palette. You've got a text area, radio drop-down, and checkbox, which are sort of standard HTML controls. You've got a number of pre-formatted controls like date, email, money, phone, quantity, and number. Number of grouping controls. Sections are collapsible sections. These are for repeating things. Tabs are, well, tabs, horizontal tabs. A panel is for side-by-side layouts. A table is a grid control. You can have static messages on your form, hyperlinks. Triggers are simply buttons that you can, when clicked on, trigger actions. This is for attachments. You can have a signature on your form as well. The form viewer is for viewing generated PDF documents. And then there are a few other controls, images, page breaks, combo box, etc. Below that, there's a custom palette, which allows you to create your own controls and save them away in a custom palette. So you can create a section that represents an address. Maybe it has a city, street, zip code, etc., and drag that into custom palette and use it across multiple forms and workflows. And then down here is the properties panel. And the properties panel shows you the properties of whatever you happen to have selected right now. Right now, it's showing you the properties of the form as a whole. So let's simply change the name of the form, and it'll change to demo form. To add controls here, you simply drag and drop. So I'm going to drag a section and drop it across. You can change its label by, for example, typing in here. You can also type down here. Hopefully that's rendering smoothly across the webinar. If not, it is very smooth, I assure you. I'm going to drag a text control here. I'll call it first name. Let's take a look at the properties of this here. We'll click on the Style tab here, and you can change the width of this. I'm going to make it 4 columns wide. You can change the width between 1 and 12 grid columns wide. I'll make it required. You'll see that the background changes to a yellowish background, indicating that this is required control. Now, of course, you can change the look and feel if you'd like. And then I'm going to drag a text control. Now frevvo has figured out that since I'm dragging this to the right of this control, I'm probably going for a side-by-side layout. So it's going to automatically make that 4 columns wide. And of course, you can change it if you'd like at any time. So I'll pop in an email address here, make that required as well. And then I'll just to demonstrate a rule here, I'm going to add a nickname control in here as well. And I'm going to make that nickname invisible. So you'll see that visible flag was unchecked over here. And I'll add a rule just so you get a look at a visual, simple conditional look at the visual rule builder here. So I'm going to click plus over here. I'm going to say, let's show and hide the nickname. So this is a kind of a contrived rule, but just to give you a look at the rule builder. So I can click on this run builder here, and I can say, when do I want the nickname to be visible? Let's say I want it to be visible when the field last name is filled. So it's not empty. So when I put something in last name, I'm going to click next over here, and the field nickname will become visible. Otherwise, I want to make the nickname as hidden. So this is a very simple, straightforward rule. We'll take a look at some more realistic rules as we get into that PO workflow here. But just to give you a look at the visual rule builder, you can use this to very easily create a variety of rules. This is an example of a conditional control. Obviously, sections, entire tabs, whatever can also be conditional in there. So it shows you over here when the last name is filled, we're going to make the nickname visible. Otherwise, it's going to stay invisible in here. Let me just very quickly add a few other controls. I'm going to go very fast now. So this is, I'm going to add a tab. I only need 2 of them. This is personal. I'm going to drag my section and stick it in this tab. This tab is called, let's say, incidents. And I wanted to do this because I want to add a repeat control here. So let's say I have an incident which has a date. It's maybe 4 columns wide. Dates on that broad. It's required. And an incident also has a description, which is also required in here. And then I'm going to drag a repeat control here, and I'm going to drop the incident into it. And you'll see when I drop the incident down here in the properties, a min and max will appear. So I'll set the min to 3 and the min to 1 and the max to 3, and you'll see a little plus icon appearing here. So what I've done essentially is I've created a repeating section. So I can add up to 3 incidents in my form when I try to submit it, but no more. And I must have a minimum of 1. Okay, so it's that easy to add these repeating items to your form. You can have nested repeats, repeats inside repeats, tables also with any number of rows. We'll see an example of a table as we go along here as well. A couple of real quick things in here, commonly used. Here's an upload control. Oops, what did I do there? So you can attach receipts in here. That's it. You know, you can again specify files. You have a minimum of 1 file in a Mac alike. That means and this upload control is required. I really don't want it to be required, so I'm going to make it 0 in here. And then you can also put in a signature control just to give you a look at what a signature looks like. Pretty straightforward here. You just click in the signature panel there, and a light box will pop up, and you can sign using your mouse or your finger on a touchscreen device. So that's a real quick look at the form designer. We created a very simple rule. We drag and drop a number of controls in there. There are a number of properties that these controls have. You can specify error messages, a hint, which is a tooltip, help. So for example, enter some help over here, and a little icon will appear. You can click on that, and the help will show up. And then a variety of other things in here, which we don't have time to go through in this webinar. There's a form designer tutorial as well as tutorial video as well as extensive documentation available on our website as well for that. The only other thing I wanted to quickly point out here is these document and form actions, and those simply are ways for you to configure what happens to your data. So I click on this, so got a number of wizards in here. You can do nothing. You can email the data, which basically isn't going to do nothing, but it's going to store the submission in the frevvo repository. You can email the data, post it to your application, and you can also do a variety of things, including saving to SharePoint, which we'll take a look at later. And form actions simply display a message when your users submit a form. So I can say thank you, and let's use first name and last name in here. So now what we have is a dynamically generated message. Everything in Frevvo, all the wizards, the URLs, messages, everything can be dynamic and can use data that's filled into the form as well. Okay. So I'm going to save this, or actually I could have used the save and test button, which I forgot about. But I'm going to click the test button, and you'll see that this form is now, you see that nickname is invisible. As I enter my last name, hopefully that nickname shows up. You'll see it did. Get rid of that, and the nickname will disappear. So that's how that rule fires. If I make a mistake in the email address, you'll see that I'll immediately get an error message. It has to be a valid email address in order for that message to go away. I won't be able to submit a form that's invalid. We'll try submitting that in a second here, but for these incidents, you see one incident is required. I can add a second one, I can add a third one, but I can't add a fourth one. Let's say I choose 2nd of October, I got a parking ticket, and I add a second incident. Frevvo is smart enough to know that this is optional, so they're not yellow background, but if I add a date, I must have a description. So Frevvo is not going to let you submit an invalid form. It's going to go do this thing automatically. And you see that this form is still invalid because I don't have a signature in here. And if I try to submit it, Frevvo is going to warn you saying, hey, this control is, I can't submit this because the signature is required. So signature pops up a box, I sign, and now I can submit my form, and you'll see it says thank you for submitting my form. So that's a super fast, really quick tour of the form designer. I apologize, it was so fast, I just don't have enough time to go through in enough detail. But as I mentioned, you can absolutely go to www.frevvo.com, our website, and if you go under Get Help and click on Videos, you will see that there are a number of available videos there, including a quick demonstration, as well as a very detailed form design tutorial. It's a 26-minute video explaining a lot about the form designer. And the video also has information on where to find the actual documentation for the tutorial. Okay, so that was a look at the form designer. I did also want to quickly go through a couple of other little things that I know are important, in particular to people who are used to InfoPath. The next thing I want to look at is this data sources piece here. And a data source is simply a way to design your form in a bottom-up manner. In Frevvo, that happens by attaching a schema, an XML schema, to your application. So in this particular application, I've uploaded this schema called employees. Let me see if I have it in here somewhere. 1 second. Employee. So I'm going to open this file here, and you'll see this is an XML schema, and it says I've got an employee ID, first name, last name, department, title, and an email address, which is a specific pattern. And that's what an employee is. Users of InfoPath, this will definitely be very familiar. But in Frevvo, you can do essentially the same thing. I've already created a form over here, but let me create a new one just to give you a quick preview of it, quick look at it at least. Down at the bottom here, there's this Data Sources tab. I can click this New from XST button. You'll see the employee business object essentially represented by the underlying schema that I added. I can open it up and add an employee. Wait for the thing to refresh. And now when I look at this employee, you'll see it has an employee ID, first name, last name, department, title, etc. And I can click plus at any level or at the root level over here to add them all. And that's how you generate a form. Now you can have schemas with hundreds of elements in there and generate very large forms automatically in Frevvo. What I can do with these is I can easily then rearrange these, so I can style it however I want in here. So I can make the form look however I want. But you'll see that the system also respects the constraints that are imposed by the schema. So the schema says that department and title have a min occurs of 0, which means they're optional, whereas the others are required controls. And you'll see that in the form, department and title don't have required is not checked. The background is not yellow, whereas the other controls are required. Everything that's defined in the schema will automatically be enforced by Frevvo. And Frevvo will also automatically generate an XML document that corresponds, that's guaranteed to conform to that schema. The other thing you can do in Frevvo here is, so let me quit out of this one and go to the form that I pre-created here. You see it's the same thing, I just rearranged it over here. But you can also initialize entire sections of the form. And in this case, it's 7 or 8 fields. It could be 200 fields that are initialized from an XML document that comes back from the backend. And you do that using this what happens to my data and this doc URIs feature here. And you'll see here that I've created a doc URI here. So without getting into great and gory details of what exactly a doc URI is, it's essentially a URL that can be dynamic. In this case, it will be dynamic because it is a function of whatever is selected in this control. But you'll see that there are XML documents that are returned by this URI. This is Game of Thrones stuff. So this is Tyrion Lannister's employee record. And in the form here, we basically set up the form so that it dynamically will initialize the employee section below, depending on which employee has been picked in here. Let's take a look at that running. And you'll see that as I select a particular employee from here, you'll see how the controls down below instantaneously populate with using the data from the XML document. Okay, so that's a real quick look at data sources. It's a very, very fast introduction. This is a complex topic. You can initialize in a single Frevvo form, can connect it to multiple data sources, initializing various controls from the form simultaneously from multiple data sources. A Frevvo form, when submitted, can also create records or update existing records using the same doc URI infrastructure. And one of the most common ways that that's used is actually in the database connector situation. So a lot of people integrate with a database, and SQL Server is the most common database that people integrate with. So this is a common example of view and update customers. Now this information is using the exact same doc URI mechanism, except that the URL points to Frevvo's database connector, which translates back and forth between SQL or record result sets from the database and XML documents. So this is very similar to that form, except the customer information is coming directly from a database. So this is actually behind the scenes, running a SQL query, retrieving the result set, transforming it into XML, and returning it to the Frevvo form, and it's automatically populating this field below. And all this is happening without you writing a single line of code to do all of this initialization of this form. As I mentioned, you can also, it's two-way. You can also write. So if I were to implement it that way, I could make an address correction here, submit the form. It's been disabled in this case, but I can update that record as well. You can also do more complex things in here. So you can have, for example, this is an example where there are dependent drop-downs. So you'll see in here, it shows some set of orders in here. But depending on which customer I select a customer, the list of orders changes. I select a different customer, you'll see it's a different set of orders coming from the database for that customer. When I select a specific order, you'll see how the line items for that order are populated in the table below. So it's all happening dynamically, connected live to a real database, and there's no coding involved, for you. You don't have to write any code to populate this giant table down below with line items for an order. You can try this out yourself as well. In this, on our website here, under that same Get Help, there's an Examples tab here, and there's database forms, and the two forms that I showed you are both available here. And there's also a link to a step-by-step tutorial for the database connector. Okay, so that was a quick look at some of the forms. Now let's jump to a workflow template example here, and we're going to connect that to SharePoint. So you'll see over here that when you're logged into our cloud system, there are a number of templates that are available here, and these are simply pre-built workflows that have, demonstrate how you can create a PO or a travel authorization or whatever that workflow is demonstrating, and they also have associated help. So I'm going to use purchase order here, and I'm going to click this green button to install it, and you'll see that the PO template gets installed, and you'll see, a guided tour sort of pops up saying, here's what we're going to do, here's sort of a introduction to how to use this workflow. So I'm not going to go through that guided tour here, but let's take a real quick look at the workflow itself. This particular one routes from employee to manager to finance. Now, when you install a template in here, again, the tour will pop up. We'll dismiss that. In this particular example, when you install a template here, we're not actually doing the routing. And that's just so it's easy for you to try it out. Otherwise, you'll have to submit it as the employee, log out, log in as the manager, perform that approval, go to forward it to finance, log out, log in again, which is kind of tedious for people who just want to try it out quickly. So to try it out quickly, look at this purchase order here. You'll see a number of things are pre-filled. The PO number and date are pre-filled here. The billing and shipping information are pre-filled. The employee information is pre-filled in here. There's a table here. This table is performing some calculations. So let's call it red. I'm going to order some red widgets. I want 17 of them, and they cost $13.61 each. You'll see how the subtotal and grand total below are being automatically computed. And the grand total is being updated here as well. There's that attachment control that I mentioned earlier. We can add files if we'd like. By the way, the attachment control also supports cameras on a smartphone. So if you happen to be using this on your smartphone or your tablet computer, anything that has a camera, instead of attaching a file, you can take a picture and attach it to your form as well. Here's the signature control. I click on this, and I'm going to sign here. You'll see that the signature date got automatically populated. Now, as it says, yeah, this is a sample, so we're not going to actually route to the manager and finance, so that is easy enough for you to try it out. When I click send to manager, the manager step is immediately displayed. We'll hide our tips here. You'll see now that the form has changed. It's the exact same form, except that the employee information and order information are collapsed. You can expand it and take a look, and the manager approval section has now become visible. So I'm going to approve this, and I'm going to say this works for me. Click on sign here, and sign as a manager. You see, this is a different type of signature because this signature is attached to this particular section. It's a digital signature that locks the section, or really uses a PKI encrypted signature that makes sure that the data inside the section cannot be tampered with. If it's tampered with, this bar below will turn red instead of being green. Now that I've approved it, I'm simply going to approve it and send it off to finance. And the same thing, really. Some section. This is another kind of signature. Again, this is not, instead of popping up the light box, it just puts your name and the date, and process and finish the PO, and the PO is going to be done. We're going to submit it. It's a copy is being emailed. Now let's say what we want to do is we want to save this workflow information into SharePoint. Again, all of the stuff that I showed you earlier, the DocURIs, the database connector stuff, it can all be incorporated into this workflow. Or form. A form is conceptually just a one-step workflow in frevvo. So what do we do about SharePoint here? So what I've done here is I've created a list. It's called purchase orders list. You'll see it has a date, number, first name, last name, email address in it. And I've also created a library in SharePoint. This is the PO library. Again, there's a document and a few metadata fields as well in SharePoint. So in order to connect this workflow to SharePoint, we're going to click on Edit, going to dismiss this tour that pops up here. And now we're going to go to this, what happens to my data, and we're going to click on Save to SharePoint. Now, it's going to go off and authenticate to SharePoint. I was testing this before the webinar, so I'm already automatically logged in. And so you'll see the SharePoint Wizard come up. You can have a couple of routes, so you can simultaneously send to 2 different places when the form is submitted or workflow is submitted. In this case, we're going to first, you're going to enter your SharePoint site URL. We're going to choose list as the destination here. You'll see the available list pop up. Here's my purchase orders list. I'm going to choose content type item here, and then you'll see a metadata mapping section show up, which essentially says I want to map columns from my SharePoint list to control names within frevvo. So pretty straightforward. I want to map first name, last name, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe I should have chosen different names so you could see that the names don't have to match at all. The column name in SharePoint and the control name in frevvo can be totally different. So we did some mappings for the SharePoint list over here, and now we're going to go and do the same thing. At the same time, what we're going to do is set this up to go also to a library. So when I select library, you'll see the list of libraries show up here. So I've got my PO library. I'm going to do documents. I'm going to send the snapshot. The snapshot is just a generated PDF and a similar mapping dialog that shows up here. So rather than go through all of these mappings over here, I'm going to go to a form. I'm going to exit this and go to a PO, the exact same PO that I've already pre-created, which has all those mappings, and show them to you, because there are a lot of mappings to do. So here's the same template. Save to SharePoint. We'll just take a quick look over here so you can see what we've done over here. So the first route is mapping to the purchase orders list, and all the fields are mapped: PO, date, number, first name, last name, and email address. And similarly for route number 2, we've matched to the PO library and first name, last name, and PO number. I'm not sure why we only have 3. That's because the library only has first name, last name, and PO number. Okay, that makes sense. So we've got this workflow over here, the same workflow that we already looked at earlier. We're not doing the actual routing here. Just to give you a quick look, by the way, you can click on the manager step here, and you'll see you can route it to a role or a specific user. In this case, you're going to want to route it to a specific user. Finance step, if I click here and say frevvo finance, now the workflow will route to a finance role. So when I go from employee to manager and I click send to finance, it'll actually go and stick this workflow on the task list of the inboxes of everybody who happens to have that role. I don't want to do that because it'll be tedious to demo it. So I'll exit without saving this, and let's take a look at running this again. This time, hopefully, everything will end up in SharePoint. The PO number is 57899. And again, I'm going to go with red and green widgets in this case. Let's enter something in here. And we got some amount grand total over here. I'm going to go off and sign this thing. Send to manager. Looks good to the manager. Whatever. Put a signature in here, approve the PO, and send it off to finance. Sign the section, and I'm going to process and finish the PO. And now what frevvo is doing at this point is it's generating the PDF document, and it should have gone and updated SharePoint. So let's go take a look, and hopefully there'll be a third one in here. You see this PO number 57899 has showed up. There's the first name, last name, and the PO number. I can click on the PDF, and you'll see how the PDF document is now visible. And you know, the PDF can also be formatted a little bit in frevvo in here. There's quite a bit of formatting available, by the way. You can add headers and footers and margins and fonts and all kinds of stuff. I've obviously put a page break about manager approval so that it breaks down into two pieces in here. go out of this. Okay, so I went to this PO in here, and we'll see that the list has also been updated. So you can see that the date, PO number, first name, last name, and email address have been created. This is for PO number 57899. So it's pretty easy. It's about as easy as that. To point and click. All you got to do is log into SharePoint. There's obviously some initial setup, one-time setup required for your tenant. Pretty straightforward. Simply point and click, choose your library, do your mappings, and boom, the rest. Frevvo takes care of the rest. So that's how you very quickly generate these complex forms and integrate them with SharePoint as well. And then the last thing that I wanted to quickly show you here was actually an upcoming feature in Frevvo, and it's coming very soon. It's stable enough, I think, to demo it. So if you look at this, remember how the subtotal and grand total were being computed automatically in Frevvo. The date was being set up automatically. It's in the current version 7.3, that's done using these business rules. And you see how the business rule actually has some coding, some JavaScript. Business rules can be written in JavaScript. Now, this is a very powerful capability in Frevvo, and there are a lot of customers who love the ability and the flexibility to be able to write these kinds of custom rules. But it also requires knowledge of JavaScript, and a skill set is required to do it. So what we've introduced, what we're about to introduce in the upcoming version of Frevvo is a visual rule builder that allows you to create many of these rules automatically. Now, of course, if you want to continue to use JavaScript, you are more than welcome to do so as well. So let me give you a real quick look at that, and then we have some time for some questions in here. So I created a form in here, visual rule builder, that has a few controls in here. So I have this table, quantity, unit price, subtotal, a grand total, and a date field as well. So I'm going to pop open this thing, and I'm going to create a new rule. So let's call it calculate subtotal. So I'm going to click on Run Builder here, and I'm going to say when, let's say you want quantity is filled. I think you want quantity and unit price to be filled. We're going to set subtotal to, and I guess we want it to be quantity multiplied by unit price. And that's it. So that's all it takes. The fact that these controls are repeating and they happen to be inside a table, et cetera, is automatically handled behind the scenes by Frevvo as well. So this rule, we'll try it out. I'm going to click the Save and Test button here. Right. And hopefully, if I did it right, we're going to see when I enter a quantity in here, that subtotal is being computed for me. So that's a lot easier than having to write a bunch of JavaScript to do this, a for loop, et cetera, to do this calculation in here. Now similar to this, you can very easily, let's create a couple of rules as well in here, just so you can take a look at some of the functions in here as well. So the grand total is, I guess we're going to do it, when does it make sense to do it? When the subtotal is filled, so it's not empty. What we're going to do is set the value of grand total to, in this case, we're going to use an expression in here. So there's a function in here, built-in function called sum, and we're going to sum all the subtotals, and that's it. So that's what a grand total is. It's like an Excel calculation. You know, a grand total is the sum of all the subtotal rows in here. So that's an example of a function. And then the last thing I wanted to do really quickly show you also was a date function. So this is an initialization function. So this is a little bit different in the sense that it doesn't depend upon any condition. We just want to perform this when the form, for the first time when the form loads. So you check this initialization rule only in here, and we're going to say, what are we going to do? We're going to set today's date to, and again, we're going to use a function, and the obvious name of the function is today. So we're going to set today's date to today, and that's it. So it's as easy as that to write some of these rules that perform pretty complex functionality in Frevvo as well. Yeah, I think this is a Come on, pop up. There we go. You see how the date was initialized. I enter a quantity, I enter a subtotal. I'm going to get a grand total there as well. So you'll see how the rules are computing values. They're being used to set up dates. This visual rule builder that's coming up is very, very powerful. There's a long list of functions and a lot of things that you can do with this visual rule builder as well. That makes it a lot simpler. So that's it. Those are the demos that I wanted to show you. There are a number of resources that are available on our website. I've pointed out most of those examples and workflows, tutorials, and video demos. But there is a ROI calculator as well. And you can take a look at that and give you an idea of how even a very simple approval workflow, this is just a 3-step approval workflow, employee to manager accounting, very reasonable assumptions, saving people just a few minutes of time on every single workflow can very quickly get you positive ROI and save you an astounding amount of money. So take a look at that on our website. Thanks very much for attending. You can certainly reach us at info@frevvo.com or the phone number out there. And my colleague Leandro is here as well and has been collecting questions. So be happy to answer any, Leandro.
Yeah.
Hopefully there are a few.
Oh, hello. Hello, everyone. Yeah, there's a few questions here. One is, I saw you installing a template. Can I take those templates and modify to my needs? And is there a cost for those templates?
There's no cost for the templates. They're included in your, they're just part of frevvo. Absolutely, you can modify those templates to fit your needs. That's those guided tours that were popping up. I dismissed them, but every time you install a template here, frevvo is going to walk you through some sort of guided tour for that particular template. Definitely suggest you pick the one that you're interested in and follow along with that guided tour all the way to the end. And right at the end, you'll actually modify the template by adding a role. So instead of it going directly from employee to manager to finance, you'll actually be doing the routing. But you can modify the form, you can modify the workflow. It's once you install it, you can do whatever you want with it.
Right. Great. So another question here is that you're right. We are InfoPath users, and the DB connector that you showed is interesting. Can it connect to multiple databases? One connector?
Okay, I believe the answer is yes. So you can connect at the same time from one connector to multiple databases. You can also have a single form or workflow simultaneously talking to multiple databases as well.
Great. Great. Is there anything I need to do? There's another question here. Is there anything I need to do for my forms to work on mobile platforms? Especially,
Sure. The question was, is there anything I need to do to make my form work on mobile platforms? And the short answer is no, you don't need to do anything at all. But you can make some adjustments if you don't like what's happening over here. So you can even get a quick preview of that. If you click on test for any of these forms, you'll see when you click on this tablet icon here, it's going to give you a look at what the form will look on a tablet. And if you click on the phone, what the form will look like on a phone. Tabs aren't ideal metaphors on a phone, but you get a look at how these things work on a phone. And then the only other thing I was going to mention is you can also introduce, there's this concept of this page break in here. So you can add page breaks to your form. If it is a long form, that will automatically break the form up into multiple pages with previous and next buttons on your smartphone or tablet if you so choose. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're okay with questions. There's one more here about what's the cost for the application? Is there a cost for the SharePoint connector?
Cost for an application?
For the product
and right.
Is there a cost for SharePoint connectors? What should I do?
Right. So there is a pricing page on our website that gives you a basic idea of pricing. But in general, we strongly encourage you to contact us because quotes and the prices are highly customized. There are a lot of tiers and a lot of configurations that are available in frevvo. As far as I know, there is indeed a cost for the SharePoint connector, but our team can provide you with an actual cost for using the SharePoint connector as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Okay, great.
Right.
Well, thank you again for attending. Hopefully you found the demonstration to be useful. We will we have recorded the webinar, so we're putting up a recording, and we'll let you know when that recording is available. Thanks again. Bye-bye.